Welcome, everybody. 4050, we will call this meeting to order. Approval of the minutes. It struck me when I read the minutes that they were from November, that we had reviewed November's minutes in the last meeting. But anyone's read the last minutes, has any comments, please do so. Otherwise, wish to approve.
I move that we approve the minutes.
Second. Sure. Discussion. All in favor? Aye.
Just to verify for the other matters, we don't have any virtual attendees. So
Okay.
No.
Great. Thanks. All right, we will move into point 4 on the agenda. Prairie Mountain Farm RPD.
So this was the item that you all had the May meeting. The applicant is here to answer any questions, and Rebecca Ragsdale, planning manager from our current development division and planning, is also here to answer any questions you might have. I'll just quickly review what you all heard last time on what we found since then. So as a reminder, back in 2006, in sort of the corner formed by Easement Road and Taylor's Gap on the southeast side of the intersection, there were 2 adjacent rural preservation developments approved, each of which has 2 preservation tracts, which are the 4 properties you see outlined there in red. The upper right, 5B8 there is the old original farm. That's got its own access out to Dickwitz Road. And the southernmost preservation tract down here also has access to Taylor's Gap. The 2 other preservation tracts, which are the 2 we're going to talk about today, were originally required to take their access from the internal subdivision road. So most likely this one here, A19, also is parcel 5B8, would access from this cul-de-sac here, and 5D9. So this preservation tract would be 20 in your handouts, with access from that there. Neither of these 2 preservation tracts has a dwelling yet. They are permitted to have. It's just a closer view of what I just told you. So you can see that there's quite a distance in this map. Here's your 2,000-foot scale. There are hundreds of feet of distance between, even in straight line distance from these access points to the approved building sites, which also were a condition of the approval of this RPD. So you can see that there's quite a distance and quite a lot of critical slopes in this orangey color to be traversed to get to those building sites from the access points. So Mr. Achenbach's proposal that you all heard last time was rather than to access each of those preservation tracts separately and from the internal roads, so you have a shared routing, which I'll show you in a minute, from Taylor's Gap instead. The justification being that this would reduce the overall impacts to critical slopes. The reason this is before you all is because this would require a new access easement that's overlying the conservation easement held by this body and by the Board of Supervisors. So at the last meeting, there was significant discussion. The authority didn't take any action, but general flavor of the discussion was that, provided that we could verify that county staff engineers agreed with the applicant's assessment that the proposed alternative access would reduce the impacts on the properties from access, that the authority would consider approving this alternate routing. This was what you saw originally as the 2 routes as a comparison. The green would be the by right route from the internal cul-de-sac on preservation tract B20 through the stream buffer, switchbacking up the slopes to where the building site is. And then the shared routing that was showed was over on E19 up these slopes to get to a ridge. There's a lot of forestry and farm roads up on these ridge tops, and then largely staying on the ridge tops to get across into the property, staying out of the stream buffers. After the last authority meeting, when you all indicated that you wanted to hear county staff review, Rebecca and I talked with the county engineer. He requested a bit more information from the applicants, which was to, rather than just see this comparison, was to show both by right driveways. In other words, not just the one from B20, but for a full comparison to say what are the impacts of the by right accesses for both preservation tracts, and compare that to what would result from the shared driveway. So the applicants did provide a plan to show that. So here you've got the two by right accesses from the cul-de-sacs with an assessment of how long they are and how much they're impacting the critical slopes. And then this item, which is in your packet, is the exhibit B, shows the alternative, which is the shared driveway plus the this stub that goes to the building site that again was locked down as part of the subdivision request. So you've got this is the comparison piece for what they'd like to do.
Ed, can you go back?
Hmm?
On the far left stub that's going into the shaded area, where your pointer is now, what is that a stream valley? What is that?
That's a stream buffer or protection ordinance stream.
Right. So what's it? It's going to the stream.
Yeah, what's not showing right here is Taylor's Gap Road.
Okay, that's what my
Yeah.
confusion was. I thought, isn't there supposed to be a road there?
Yeah, there is.
Okay,
Not showing this particular plan, but that's the access.
right. And then just beyond that, it goes zigzag, and then going down, move your pointer down. What's that?
That says existing farm road. There is no farm on Loudon.
Okay,
Follows up on this.
but it's not being used. It's just an old,
It's just showing the location.
gotcha,
At this point, the new, switchbacking driveway is meeting that
right,
and continuing along out here.
right. And how much of going in the direction you were just going, how much of that follows that alignment of an old road that's discernible as a road now? If you walk there, you'd say, oh, there's a road here.
I think that's what we're talking about to explain that. Because the site here,
The entirety of the ridge, there's a road.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, like
Thought I remembered that from the last time.
the image on the aerial GIS is really helpful because you look at it, you can see it.
Yeah, I'm just trying to put it back into my head. That was my recollection, was it pretty much it does follow the ridge top. And that, as you said before, there's old logging roads and whatever. And they probably still are recognizable pretty.
They are.
Sorry I didn't get a chance to go out there and actually see that, but just the way I'm going down.
So having received the amended by right plan and then the comparison plan for the proposed driveway, the county engineer compared them and did agree that the proposed access has fewer impacts. These numbers are from the applicant's most recent analysis with that more complete review. You all saw a table like this last time that had slightly different numbers because it didn't take into account the driveway into 819, the Western Preservation Tract. So this is an accounting from the applicant's engineer about the differences in WPO buffers. And I want to be clear, these are not easement buffers. There are no buffers in this. It's an RPD easement. They're pretty basic. These are water protection ordinance buffers. And then critical slopes. So you can see here there is a significant almost 25% reduction in the slope disturbance from the alternative routing of this driveway.
Scott, the disturbance of the water protection, presumably that can be mitigated.
They would have to be mitigated, if I understand correctly.
So that the 100% figure is really. the
It's more than for
theoretical
your
figure.
information, again, because that's not a term of the easement. Those buffers aren't required in the easement.
But-
Land
but
disturbances-
I don't understand what this is showing. It, the critical slope disturbance is reasonably clear to understand, but the water protection, presumably anything that is disturbed can be mitigated and replaced so that it would be a disturbance during construction, but not afterward.
The road would be in the buffer.
Yeah, the road would have to go through and across the buffer. Just off the screen here is
Yeah.
that expected by right access to be 20. So that entire access road would follow this old road. My pointer will show this old road through the buffer. So that would have to be improved to the driveway standards, and then, you know, where it comes down here into the buffer, back out again and starts switch back into the slopes. So if they did the by right access, the driveway for B20 would have to go through a fair amount of that stream buffer before it could cut off the slope.
You're using the term by right to indicate the approved access from the existing subdivision.
That's right. Because that was the access that they
As
approved.
specified on the approval.
Yes.
Can you explain why there's only, I mean, where are the critical slopes that aren't already disturbed on the new, on this proposed? I mean, if there's, I mean, what I'm saying is if there's already a logging trail there, and I tried to go out and walk this place. I waited too long. It's tough, particularly getting in from that cul-de-sac. But I looked at it on Google Earth. I'm just curious, most of that is seen, you can see the paths, so I'm just curious. Are those already disturbing critical slopes? Because I don't understand only a 24% reduction.
There may have been some disturbance quite a long time ago. I'm not really sure. I've gone through some older aerials back into the 50s. I can't remember relative to the ones from the 30s. There's been logging roads back in there for a very long time. The issue is that the roads that are out there are not going to meet the width or slope standards that we require for residential access driveways. We don't have slope standards and width standards that have to be met in order for there to be safe rescue access, basically. I don't remember off the top of my head what those are, but you know, something like 15-16%, Rebecca, something like that for driveways, and it'll be a maximum slope. So there's a lot of places logging roads are going to exceed that and also going to be too narrow. So there's quite a bit of land disturbance that has to happen to widen the road out and cut it differently so it meets the slope standards. And that's the analysis that Mr. Achenbach's engineer did. Was to do. And I talked to Kelsey, who works for engineering. She tried several different routings. This estimate here of what they thought was as long and as impactful as that is, with the big switchback across the slope. They tried several different ways to get there, and this was about the best they could come up with. Even from the applicants, and that's a lot of earthwork. That's a lot of money. So they're trying to reduce the amount of earthwork they have to do this. Yeah, you can kind of see here this outline of the yellow around the black road. It's the degree of cutting and shaping that's happening out beyond, even if there is a road there. I don't know if there is one in that spot.
No, not gonna be up the critical slope there.
Is it one where-
So even the center line on the proposed one might impact critical slopes, let alone the widening. I'm just curious. I didn't see
It goes
those.
through mostly that white area which is the very top of the ridge top. There's no critical slopes there.
But this is the by right.
Yeah.
How about the proposed one? I just didn't see, I thought it impacted critical slopes far less than what you're only saying 24-25%.
Oh.
This whole stretch right there, angling with that slope is going through critical. Right when it gets up to the top.
No, I was talking about the other way.
see the-
Yeah.
There's some. This is really long. Slopes and stream buffer.
So a lot of the areas that are where the current logging roads are, if you go out there and walk them, they're gradual cut in place roads. But on GIS, they still show as critical slopes. And so it's not taking that into consideration. So when she's calculated the square footage of critical slopes impact on where those logging roads are, it's not like, in a lot of places, it's not even taking into consideration that there's a road there. So it's over estimating the amount of critical slope impact based on GIS.
That's kind of not the point of how the ordinance works, though. And just because there's an old skid road that cuts across a critical slope,
But it,
doesn't,
it's not,
doesn't mean improving that.
but
Doesn't
the
affect critical slopes.
the road is not in critical slope, so it's on top of the ridge line.
Oh, well, all right, but we were talking about where it does go.
And I'm just curious where the proposal does impact new critical slopes, critical slopes that the old paths aren't. I mean, when I looked on Google Earth and I really blew it up to see as much detail as I could, and I also have a program that gives me I have another package that gives me all the contours, but not super. I just didn't see much of that down here on this corner that seemed to kind of go down a slope and up a slope.
It's unfortunately, it's a lot clearer in the PDFs in the packet. This projector is not showing it very well. If you look, I can show everybody my view, but you can see there's a significant difference. There's a yellow background. It's not showing up on the monitor here, on the screen here, where the slopes are.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
This new switchback here is going through some slopes.
Okay.
Your conclusion and the recommendation of the staff is that the proposal is preferable to what is currently been approved. There are several problems with this. First of all, this body, in my view, is not obligated to take any action. We're being asked to take action. But we are not required to take any action. When we discussed this a month ago, it seemed that what we wanted to have occur was to have the other approvals discussed and reviewed by the county, and then have it come back to us as the last step once we knew what the changes were in their entirety. And you did a very good job in the memo of laying out that there are a number of other facets of this that do not affect this body's, that are not within this body's purview. Lighting changes, siting of structures, and more flexibility than is currently in the approved plan. None of those restrictions are in the deed, to my reading. They don't require any action by this body. Nonetheless, the principle that we've had forever, I believe, is that if we accept a modification of an easement, which has a very high threshold, it should be to improve the conservation value by the action. It may be, given your recommendation, that this would improve the conservation value of the easement, but it does not necessarily overcome the general problem of accepting any modification of an easement, particularly of an RPD. The optimal preservation value here would be if the building sites were moved so that a new access road was not required to either of the two parcels. And that, to my eye, could be done, but it would take it off the slope, which presumably a developer would not wish to have occur. It would be a less attractive, less marketable, less financially attractive project. But the best conservation solution would be a different building site. Therefore, my strong suggestion is that we take no action. Let the other approvals go forward. And in the event we are asked later, after those have gone forward, those be incorporated in the new deed in such a way that they improve the conservation value of this easement.
There's two things I want to mention just to give a little clarity about that. First of all, with the approach of moving the building sites, especially on no idea.
We've been hacked.
On the preservation tract B20, which I hope to have up on the screen any moment now. There aren't a lot of other choices for building sites, even if that separate zoning condition setting those building sites in place. It looks from a casual view like there's a building site way up by the cul-de-sac, and there really isn't. There's slopes and stream buffers up there that prevent that area from being used. So, given this is a subdivision that's already in place, moving the building site for B20 would almost mean moving the property lines for a subdivision that's already done it.
Moving the what?
The property lines for spots in the subdivision. Seems beyond anybody's purview at this point. So that's one thing. The other thing is, this isn't proposed as an amendment to the deed itself. So we do have a very strict policy about avoiding amendments whenever possible, and then only doing it where they improve the conservation. But this isn't actually amending the deed. This is just allowing a new easement to go over top, just in the way we did for the Yellow Mountain easement for the power lines. And this is more impactful, but it's the same idea. The property owner and the conservation easement holders need to approve a new overlying easement, but that's not an amendment to the conservation easement.
But an overlying easement needs to be more restrictive. It can't be less restrictive.
It just needs to not conflict, because it's a different thing. It's not part of the conservation easement. It's just a new separate document. So if that, presumably neither the landowner nor the conservation easement holder would approve a new overlying easement that negatively impacts the resources on the site, but that doesn't change the terms of the conservation easement. The original deed from 2006 would just remain in place.
Then why do we need to take any action at all?
Because as I understand it from our attorneys, that there's a general principle that all of the people or bodies that hold a property interest need to consent to a new overlying easement.
I see where Dr. Moses is going, and let's hope we can get there going the way he thinks. I'll use the term administrative, even though it's, well, and then maybe it is, and maybe it's not, but the approval for the access roads. You just don't want us to be part of the deliberative process to approve the roads for precedential reasons. It's got nothing to do with the road, whether the road's good or bad at this point. It's you want the county staff to exhaust its remedies with in-house to establish the right-of-way locations for the roads and go through that process so that they are approved. And then you want that decision to come to us for us to look at it and say, okay, yep, that seems to be a better conservation solution to that. We agree, but I think you're also saying that we're not bound, we're not duty bound by our charter or whatever to make this decision separately from the county staff. The county staff can make the decision, and we can, I won't say rubber stamp it, but give our approval to on the basis that it's a better conservation solution.
Put that another way, we co-hold the easement with the Board of Supervisors. We should be the second to last stop or the last stop just before or just after the Board of Supervisors. After all of the legwork has been done beforehand so that we can see a complete proposal.
So Scott, the way that I read your memo, I appreciate that there's a lot of information because it just helps you make a better decision, even though it's not part of our domain, so to speak. But what I thought you had proposed or were asking us in your memo was if B20 it's its new proposed road, then it has to cross over A19. And that would be A19 already has its by right road. But we would have to approve that the easement is on top of that by right road. They will be one and the same. We have to approve that he has access to it on B20.
Shared access.
Yeah, it's shared as far as that cutoff. E19 building site.
So what I was saying, if somebody else has already decided that an alternative road is allowed, then what we're being asked is the easement or the right of way that sits on top of A19's by right road is also going to be the access for B20.
Who we haven't heard from is the other side of the county staff and
Right,
what
but-
they're thinking.
So specifically, who do we need to hear from?
Well, my understanding, what you all wanted to hear last time was the county engineers review of the applicant's comparison of the impacts. And so that's what we went away and did, and county engineer, being an engineer, very quickly saw that there was more information that needed to be added, to be added both so-called by right driveways, the individual accesses, in order to do the full comparison against the shared access. So that's what we got from the applicants.
Do we have an inkling what the county staff's thinking is on the total amount of information that they have now? Or are they waiting for us to be the approving body?
So
We're
we're
gonna-
not waiting on you. This is, we're providing information and we've done our analysis. I think the question maybe Richie can clarify is what is the ask of this body and what is needed before? And this whole, talk to everybody about this, the history of this project and the order of the steps has been kind of confusing. So if we could get some clarity on that.
So, I think the ask is a little more focused and a little simpler. This could be structured in a number of different ways as it's been presented. Neither the Board of Supervisors nor this body is being asked to be a party to the easement. Really what we're being asked to do is to under the deed to make a finding that these driveways are consistent with the easement. There's talk about by right driveways. I'm not, I mean, under the easement that the landowner has with the board and with this body, they have a right to driveways, but they have to be consistent with the easement. I don't know if there's ever been a historical determination by this body or the Board of Supervisors that what we identify as by right, or maybe that's part of the subdivision plan, whether those are consistent with the easement. We've got a bunch of moving parts, but as I understand it, the landowner is asking for this body to determine that, I don't know if that's that's not the one. The layout that what they're suggesting is consistent with the easement. Dr. Moses is correct that this body is not obligated to make a decision or to take any action. I've just always interpreted it in terms of being the landowner, because this body and the Board of Supervisors in perpetuity has a say as to what those roads, where they can be, what they are, and there's no statute of limitations that a responsible landowner would want to get this body's and the Board of Supervisors determination that it's consistent. Outside that, that means they build the roads and they have a matter of there's something of public record that says that that there's been a determination made so that a future Board of Supervisors or future Conservation Easement Authority won't come in and say, wait a minute, we don't agree with this. So that's the way I read the way it's set out. The easement proposed doesn't ask us to approve it, doesn't ask us to be a party to it. It could, but it doesn't.
So when these were approved, going back when the original preservation subdivisions were approved. In a building sites were approved on the preservation tracks. Were the driveways discussed at that time?
I honestly don't know if they were discussed. I was part of that review.
I mean, obviously, there's an assumption that you've got a road here and a building site here, that there'll be something connecting them.
Yeah, you think, typically for a subdivision, and Rebecca can correct me because she knows a lot more about subdivision than I do. We require building sites to be shown. You have to show that somewhere on any lot you create, you have to have that 30,000 square foot, 5:1 or less rectangle of area without critical slopes, stream buffers. Floodplain, thank you. But we don't necessarily say that's absolutely where you have to build.
Okay, well, my point is that what we've been calling the by right driveway wasn't approved as when the track was.
No driveway was approved because that's not part of the.
Okay,
subdivision.
so
But the building sites.
so there is no,
No, except that from the way the plat was done for the subdivision, it's clear that the entry, which is specified in the division, is to occur from the new road that was put in for the subdivision.
but no line connected point A, let's call that to the building site point B.
Mr. Axel?
It had the entrance.
So,
It showed where the entrance was.
so
But
I'll
there
just-
was no,
I think the in-between, I think he's got the point. The in-between was not defined, but with the subdivision process, you're supposed to have a single point of access. The subdivision plat was approved under the ordinance to allow, what we're calling, we're calling the by right points of access now, but the driveway locations, this analysis we found was not done at that time. But based on this analysis and the points of access that were established, we see the consequences of that. And this proposal we see as better.
my point being, we're not really changing anything that has been at some point in the past already approved. We're looking at two completely new things, right? And so we're comparing one new thing to another new thing, and one of them's clearly better than the other.
And it's like I did a lot of GIS and aerial and then looked at plats. And it's just like when you were saying that, find that 30,000 square feet, that's the building site. And a combination of those things and looking at where the logging trails are, it makes total sense where those building sites are because of those internal roads that are there. And it's actually this second road, that the proposed road coming through follows those existing trails. They actually make more sense, aside from the fact that it had to be eased over another property.
So can we get the county staff to pick the alternative that has the least amount of impacts so that we can then see what it is and go, yes, this is doing a better job protecting the conservation values of the easement than
Haven't we
the
seen
other
that?
thing that you proposed.
Haven't we seen that?
I think we have.
Right.
But
That's what we asked for, and that's what we.
there's a procedural issue that Dr. Moses is concerned about, and I can I think I understand that.
Yeah.
And I'm willing to go through that process so we don't get crossed up at some point in the future.
I think also that there should be consideration given to the modifications of the approvals for the siting of buildings, additional buildings, and so forth. So that if what is going to be built on either of these two parcels is in some way out of scale with what was originally approved, we ought to know before we approve it.
Yeah, that's it's a horse of a different color.
You're allowed to.
I just want to understand this, and I apologize because I was not at the last meeting, but when you said that we should be the final say after all the approvals are in place, what are you talking about, like zoning and
The
engineering and all?
And that all the changes that are being proposed are consistent with the original RPD.
Which is so old.
was there, and I would just interject that I believe that's contemplating an amendment of the preservation tract easement, the conservation easement. which again is appropriate. It's just when I said there are a number of different ways you could approach it, that's a different way.
But if we have to do an amendment, then at least in my view, there ought to be restrictions that do truly preserve the conservation value. What's the composition of the road? Is it impervious or pervious? Is it going to be, what timbering is to occur? What additional buildings and what will their impact be? If we are being asked to modify an easement, it should be to improve the conservation value of the easement.
Well, that has, I understand, but there's a lot going on, where that building site is not gonna get moved by too many acts of God. I mean, it's part of a plan that has the building site specified. The roads aren't specified, the accesses, the terminus is, but not the road.
Right.
And the terminus aren't really in our purview to talk about whether that terminus should be moved. I mean, they want to move it, fine, but the easement, I'm trying to understand, this is a bit like the ACE program. A lot of this stuff's vetted over there, and then it comes to us, and for a long time, we didn't even know what it was. It was a rubber stamp, yeah, gone. Then we insisted that, hey, we have more interest. So when people meet us on the street and say, oh, you hold the easement on this, you know what you're doing. At least you know you're upholding an easement on it. And you know a little bit about the trades and that went on to get it into the ACE program. This is a bit similar. We're being handed this. A lot of the work, we didn't pick that site.
No, I don't think,
And I don't think we should go back and try to rework the easement we would have put on the site.
I have a
I think
strong
this is-
suspicion that things wouldn't work out exactly the way they worked out when this was, I doubt we wouldn't see this exact thing again.
So I'm just reluctant to get into it to the degree that's being expressed here. That we have an opportunity, a window of opportunity to rework this whole thing so that we minimize even building sites, easements, other things we take into consideration. To me, I like the other plan where go ahead and plan it, and convinced me that that's a better route. Maybe there's even a better one in there that we
I
would
can't
come up with.
imagine what it would be.
But I'm just saying that this is not that window of opportunity to rework our template.
No, we don't have a pathway to do that anyway.
We.
So just again, for my understanding, so has the county approved these proposed roads? In theory, assuming they meet
Not for
specifications.
the subdivision plat. Once somebody comes back in for a building permit, then there can be, when they're building the access, there's engineering review of the roads at that point, which is what we've been working on here and Rebecca's been working on, to get to this answer about, is the proposed alternative better than the way you would have to go otherwise? Not during the subdivision plat, but late, once somebody buys the lot and goes to build on it, then there is engineering review of the grading necessary, and making sure that you have the proper slopes so you can access it. One thing I wanted to mention earlier, didn't quite get to, was I mentioned that building sites typically are not, you have to show a building site, but you don't necessarily have to use that exact building site. That's not the case here. You have to use these exact building sites because the weird additional step, and I apologize for all the additional complications, but most RPDs, there are two RPDs here next to each other, each with two preservation tracts. The usual RPD, as many of you have seen in the past, has one preservation tract. And the county code allows for the zoning administrator, I think it was, to allow more than one if it's justifiable in their mind or design standards. So in this case, they did approve two preservation tracts per RPD rather than one, but they put several conditions on it. And one that's really relevant here today is that those building sites are locked out by these conditions. Which is, you know,
That is, given the history of this body and RPDs, that was one of the most telling reasons why I articulated the position as I did earlier on. RPDs have been problematic for this body every time we've seen one.
Take note.
Yeah.
They result in having nothing being conserved. There's nothing preserved. And when we have an opportunity to preserve, we should take it. And if that means changing where the road goes, fine, but then let's make sure that there's something conserved in the process. Forestry, water, minimizing the impact of the slopes, and particularly siting of the buildings.
Yeah,
Please.
I mean, I've been working on this for over a year because it's got a lot of hair on it. I've proposed what I think is the better option. And maybe this is the goal for you all, but at some point, I'm just gonna give up. And whoever comes in next if they decide to go up the side of the mountain, they go up the side of the mountain. And they don't need to come in here and ask for approval. I mean, ultimately, I know it is not a solution that you all want to see, but it is the better solution in my opinion. So there is an opportunity to preserve here by not allowing the by right option.
I think we've established that there is no by right option.
Right.
But not a
Right.
pre-approved. That other
That-
road is no more approved than this.
No, but the
No,
terminus
but I-
is.
Termini.
Right, to put a driveway.
Yeah. No, it's not clear. It's just that that exact road coming from the cul-de-sac might be the only way to
Yeah,
get from
right.
there to there.
I know, we've looked at all.
I'm sure that's true.
Yeah.
But nobody saw that. That wasn't pre-approved by the county staff or anybody
Question.
else at any time,
So
and then any more than this one.
in terms of
It's-
process, they're proposing to change something, but if they weren't proposing to change the points of access, would the would the driveways for the building sites have to come before you at all? Or is it only coming before you because those points of access were shown on plats? That's where I'm getting confused.
So actually, the only thing that they're asking is for an easement over one property, one east property
That's what's really.
to another. That's really the only ask.
So I'll interject
Is that,
in whatever bundle of rights this body and the board of supervisors has. It's when they put in a roadway or driveway, is it consistent with the easement?
Right.
And so if they put in a driveway that's straight up or down a mountain, as was suggested, and they undertake to do that, and this body decides that that's not consistent with the easement, then this body can decide to enforce it. That a judge decides whether it's consistent with the easement or not. That's why I say I think the landowner is responsible coming to people who hold interest in this property to say, please tell me if it's consistent or not, what your position is.
Right.
But to the other extent, if they just go in there and start building, if county staff says it's okay, you can build this, and they come in and build it without asking permission from this body and the board of supervisors, they run the risk of one of those bodies saying that it's not consistent. They try to enforce it.
Well,
Just to be clear that that's based on you're totally right. If this body finds that something that's built is not consistent, the body's got the right to enforce that. But there isn't something written into the deed that says you have to do steps 1, 2, and 3 to get any driveway approved by the authority.
Does not.
I see two positives over other RPDs. One that you just mentioned, we've had such headaches with preservation tracks where we haven't been able to specify where the building lights are and where the building sites are. They were floating and they would go over creeks. It was, I don't know if it was Dudley Mountain or somewhere, I don't remember.
Dudley Mountain was the one where they built the fish pond on the hill slope above the other houses.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's like the houses in the RPDs would end up in places that we never thought we would put them. I feel like we have an opportunity here to actually could dictate where the roads go. You know, we know the building sites have to be there. This we know, you know,
I think there's a risk here that by pushing the body in one direction is going to be misinterpreted. Could I ask just one thing for clarification? You have an option on B20.
E20, yes.
What about A19?
There's another buyer who has an option on that.
Do you have an agreement with A19 for this road?
I have an agreement with the current landowner.
Who is the current landowner?
It's a guy, a gentleman named Jimmy Fang. It's under an LLC. I believe he lives in Virginia Beach.
Why have we not heard from him?
Because I've been the one undertaking this whole thing.
And he's in agreement?
Yes.
Representative last meeting.
The other buyer did.
So I'm sorry, I just make sure I'm clear on this. So what we know is they have a right to build structures on these two sites. That's clear. And
In those places.
in those places, by virtue of that, they have a right to build a road somewhere to get to those houses. There's no road that's been specified or approved by
Us
us
or
or
anybody
anyone
else.
else. And so this is really wet clay, right? This is, and so it sounds to me like this is the lesser of the evils on a really steep slope. And, you know, I don't think we can take the position, well, really should build a house.
Richie,
I don't
or
think we are.
Rebecca, is there a difference if you call it a driveway or a road? Because obviously this is either a private road or it's a driveway from the public road to the building site.
There's different road standards for slope and width in vertical figure based on the number of lots it's serving. But these are
This is a
just
driveway.
because it's two, it stops at two.
It's two up to the Y there, and then it's one. So these are just driveways.
So they're both driveways. So then on A19, that's where the easement, he has to go over A19 to get to B20.
Why couldn't these just be gravel?
It can be. It may be.
So what's this width and all that stuff? I mean, it's just a
That was the
one laner that you have to.
That was the-
negotiate. I mean, if it's a driveway,
That was the rationale for my suggesting that we do this at the end of the process. If we have a proposal before us that said there's going to be a gravel road over A19 to access B20.
Yeah.
And it's going to be X width for one car, period. That's a compelling proposal. This could be 2 lanes. And without specification of the use of the property, particularly A19 over which it has to travel, what we're doing is opening up a can of worms for all sorts of problems that we can't anticipate. At least now, if a road goes in as specified up the mountain, yes, there will be environmental impact and it will cost more to drive that road. It isn't clear to me that the environmental impact would be that much less.
So we have the opportunity now to clarify what that road is, whereas otherwise we might not.
With composition as well as the route. That's my point.
A question for county staff on that point. I mean, there was a fire in this area, a forest fire. Wasn't a very big one, but
The majority of
Well,
A19
thankfully.
burned.
so.
Get any bigger.
I mean, you
The
know,
fire department used the
compared
roads.
to, you know,
They use those roads,
They used all
so
of
they
it.
got brush trucks back in.
And
What's
they,
that?
So, and that's where I feel like,
and they graded out a lot of it too.
So they did some of the work for you guys.
Well, and actually,
I'm sorry, we're on the fire question.
if they
right
could
how
have been-
Dan Jordan died.
Yeah, Jordan
down
died.
here, they cut a new
He had a
road
heart attack after the fire, at the
To
fire.
to get over to
He
those.
lives right.
Okay.
So anyway, my point is this, what are the county requirements? Minimum build requirements for
So
a
there's
a
requirements
driveway
for
like this?
Yeah, there's requirements for driveways in the ordinance.
Does the fire engine have to be able to get up?
Yes, and that's where.
Okay,
this
can
has
you
been-
tell us what the dimensions and requirements of that?
So, and that's where
Driveway.
I don't mean, I guess, yes, I can't read my screen right now.
You want some specificity, and I can understand that.
But I guess that's my question for, this is more a process question for this committee, and I, as a bystander, would like to understand, so we understand. And that's where, what is your purview? They're asking for a change, so there's an opportunity, and it sounds like you may want to be more restrictive than the original easements allowed. But there is, the purpose of the driveway lot access requirements is to make sure that there is safe and convenient access. And fire safety, of course, is paramount. In the rural areas, it is minimum standards for lot access are 16% grade, a travel way of at least 10 feet, shall extend to within 50 feet of each dwelling, and shall include a rectangular zone super adjacent to the driveway so that it's clear of obstructions that is at least 10 feet in width and 14 feet in height. Sometimes easements can be wider than that, but that's the bare minimum, in our ordinance.
So Scott, did the engineer, when he came up with these numbers apply? Do you know if he applied these numbers? The 16% grade?
Yeah,
and
we
then-
talked about that.
I feel like you mentioned that
I'm pretty sure they're not gonna build a lot more road than they need because it's gonna be an expensive road no matter what. But I think we would, from a conservation protection standpoint, preservation standpoint, it might be nice to have some parameters that say, well, yeah, it won't be any wider than X, Y, Z. And we intend to build it using crusher run.
I just don't. I don't know what I'd be willing to commit to just here on the spot, and
No, you don't
and
have to do it.
it's, well, I mean, this is really drag on. In my opinion, we left the last meeting, I was supposed to go to the county to get their approval, which I felt like I did. This was the next step. So it's a bit of a surprise that we're kind of moving goalposts a little bit, but again, at some point, I'm just gonna pack it in and just say enough is enough. I've just beat my head against the wall.
I think we're trying to help you out here, honestly. So
Okay, so these termini, well, building sites, but these places up there in the cul-de-sacs, one to get to one to get to the other. Those are the only hard points that have been codified or something, okay? Or at least in the deed, I guess. Is it in the deed? That those,
Those are not- That's not related to the deed, that's related to the subdivision.
okay, so now, if the question was, and it's never been shown, how you get from there to the building site, so
We do have.
there's an infinite number of spaghetti diagrams you could draw.
theoretically,
So in effect, we would expect somewhere down on Taylor Gap Road there to be a decision that would be the new approved.
you gotta get an entrance permit from VDOT.
Okay,
has that happened?
so now that we don't have anything to say about that.
No.
Nothing. They can say, that's it. Now the question is, all right, there's got to be a road from that point to this house.
What's
And
the
they get
best
all,
way?
I mean, again, I'm back to show us exactly, because that, we don't have anything to do with that. Now we may have something to say about the path of that road, and so far, I can't see anything wrong with what's been. It seems optimized for what we would have an interest in easement of an access road. We don't have anything else to say about this. I don't think so.
I think we're going in circles.
Yeah, we're back to this. So,
So to your point, it seems to me that no matter where the road goes, theoretically, we'd be in this room talking about it. Am I right about that?
Not if it were built according to that
I
plan.
don't believe so,
Because it doesn't go across.
because there wouldn't be an easement.
That's. That
You
easement
across, I understand your position. But what you are asking for is not simply a new road. You're asking for a series of changes to building sites and to lighting specifications, all of which had a rationale nearly 20 years ago. So you're reopening decisions that were taken long before we were here. Some of us were here. A few of you may have been here in 2005, but not many. So you're asking us to reopen a decision that was taken 20 years ago. With that in mind, you're asking us to modify an easement with an overlaying easement that is not more restrictive than the current one. It's less restrictive. And that is the fundamental problem. We have one, incomplete information from the county staff on the other aspects. And we are being asked to take a position that is very difficult for this body to do because it does not clearly follow the usual procedure of having us come at the end of all of these decisions.
My understanding that the condition changes, which there's one change to the lighting, the other is more of a determination as to how it's worded. Those are zoning changes. Those are not part of this decision here. Those were made by the zoning department.
That was a,
Right.
those conditions were imposed by part of the approval that's for reservation tracts. That was entirely in the hands of either the zoning administrator or the director of community development. But either way, it's entirely a staff call as to how to approve that request and what the conditions are. And to amend those, again, that doesn't need to come to this body or the board or the planning commission for that matter.
Did the original conditions come to this body?
No,
So I just really read your memo several times and followed it along. So you did the background, you did the discussion, you show the chart with the differential. And then you say the recommendation, staff recommended that the authority approve the request for the new overlying access easement on the tax map 74 parcel 54B. That's what we're supposed to be addressing.
That's our focus.
Staff has said, this is our recommendation. We've got the engineers looked at the, the old proposed and the new proposed, and that's why we're here. And we're not asking about moving the building sites. We know that can't be done. How many lights you have at the door. It's not part of our thing. It was just for your information. There's some other stuff going on, but we don't have to focus on that. We didn't even have to read it. I do have one question, Scott. The first chart that you showed for the WPO and the critical slope, and then further into the memo, there's another chart with a little different number on them. I didn't understand it said under attachment B.
yeah, the one that's later was from the earlier analysis. That was the table you all would have seen for the May meeting, which was based off of this drawing, which didn't have the other so-called by reg shown, so it wasn't really a complete analysis. That was the county engineers. After you all acted, Ms. Wilk didn't act and said, we want to hear the county engineering review. Rebecca and I talked to the county engineer and said, I'm basically these, the by right accesses and the proposed complete. And so the reason you're seeing two tables there is the old one from May was from that earlier incomplete comparison. The one in this month's memo, which is this one, is on the most current.
Okay.
Oh, well, that's interesting because the old one would have showed like a 45% improvement. And now by fine tuning it, the engineer has said it's approximately about 25%.
From the applicants.
Okay,
The county engineer has looked at all this information and said he concurs.
okay.
It's kind of like what you were getting at earlier. So that it's similar to what you were getting at earlier, that it appears that there's more beneficial.
No, I think there is, but I'm also, I like the focus because I don't think we have really the opportunity to redo a lot of this. But we do have an opportunity to say something about disturbing between the point A and point B. We do have an interest in that. So my question is, do we have, what authority or where are we in terms of saying anything about the nature of that road? I'll go back to the gravel, the width or something. Do we have,
Well, wait, in one of the attachments, it's a 30-foot wide easement. It seems like the width of the road, as you were saying, that is something we have control over, that, and the width of the road will dictate what can.
to be consistent with the easement?
It's only the portion of the road that, the shared portion that crosses the
Yeah.
one lot. Width of that easement, it's just an access easement, so we can get a road somewhere in there. Are you troubled by the fact that it's 30 feet and the road, the driveway will?
I'm just
only-
asking a high level question. Do we have any right? Other, I mean, okay, what's our alternative? To say we're not going to even weigh in on this? We're gonna do nothing. County can do what it wants to do, and we're gonna just waive our opportunity to do anything. I don't understand.
At some point, I think we have
It's a
to,
jointly held
approve
easement,
the overlying access easement.
and that has,
That's all we have to.
and that's this is a sequential issue. What are we really approving? Well,
Dr.
I-
Moses's point is that if we're going to go through the process of approving an easement, then we should make sure that that approval maximizes the preservation effect of the action on the easement.
But we can't hold them by hostage by asking for.
If we
Don't
were being
disagree.
asked to approve an easement that said a fire truck wide road that is gravel, I would have no problem with it, but that's not what we're being asked to approve. We're being asked to approve a generality, which sets a precedent that I don't want to set.
that's what I'm trying to get at here.
So how do we get approval?
Ask for a more restrictive easement.
So just from where you said, would you be
Oh, you mean
open
the
to
access?
the idea of saying the road will meet the minimum county standards for a road and
Driveway.
The only concern there is practical use. You've got a mile long road running through. You've got cars coming on both sides and
You're on a
there's
slope.
steep slopes on either side. I don't want to say.
Gotta have a pull off
There's
somewhere.
gotta be
You have to
some,
have some kind of pull.
gotta be.
Yeah.
And also there's the component of it's a shared driveway, so the other owner would have to weigh in on this as well. As to know what they're willing to. So there are things that we will be willing to agree to, but I don't know right here, right now. What the-
Yeah, I get it, right.
I mean, the fact, I'm kind of looking at the fact that we've got 3 parties agreeing to get us to a point that has a better conservation impact is a positive thing versus if this falls apart, then it might be sold as 2 separate parcels with the old plan happening of, the road having more impact on critical
I
slopes.
say we nail it down now to the best of our ability.
Right.
So I think the answer, as I'm reading the group, is simply come back to us with a proposal that's the minimum disturbance. 12-foot wide with turnout.
So you're saying the actual easement, revise the easement draft that we put together that specifies what we've done within the easement? Is that what?
Access easement.
The access.
Very specifically, and it would be also helpful to have all of the county approvals done in advance, so you come to us at the end.
In my opinion, I've already gotten the 14404, which is the only county approval other than Board of Supervisors. I've done exactly what you asked.
We haven't seen it.
I think we are at the point where this body and the board are the remaining pieces.
So that's what the memo says.
I mean,
But you've alluded to changes that
When they go to get a building,
no, it has to go to the planning commission.
I think I speculated in the May memo that it might need to go to the planning commission. It doesn't. Because we're not changing the design of the RPD. If we're moving plots around, we would. I can't remember if that was in that memo. I know I said it to Mr. Achenbach in an email that it might be necessary. We've since figured out that it's not, because the planning commission's review is about the lot arrangement. That's not changing.
So when your engineers were calculating the critical slope distance, were there measurements of that road or driveway that they were using in their calculation?
Off the top of my head, it's either 10 or 12. I'm not sure,
Why?
but I don't know. I can find out.
so like, we've got a copy of your deed right here,
The draft.
the draft. Can we dial down language that we put into this draft right now?
Even capable of doing that.
No, I would strongly recommend we not wordsmith a document
Okay.
that committee.
I'm just saying, I'm not saying go in there and change it right now. I'm just saying that we all parties are on the same page in terms of the language.
It should, in my view, should be, it should be a permeable surface meeting the minimum
That's what I'm
of
getting at.
And that's where,
Permeable.
you know, the county engineer is gonna have to review it. I wouldn't want to go, that's where I'm hesitant for y'all to go that far. to
Okay.
be
Yeah,
honest.
I was just gonna say, the engineers have presented these numbers, they're based on a certain set of facts where they made these calculations. So if they say, we made all these assumptions and how we derived that it's almost a 25% improvement over the alternative. And then we know what the width is and
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think that, so you're just asking for more specification on what was planned?
what their assumptions were when they calculated, their numbers.
I think it should, I mean, we should be able to look,
Yeah, I couldn't find out. I remember reading 30, but I have been reading something else.
Well, I
so,
think what we did discuss, and it may not have been updated in the narrative, was they did the analysis based on the ordinance standards for the lots. And they're the same for a 2-lot private street or a driveway access. And there might have been, I'm not sure if they put on the plans what the width they used was. I thought they did, but that's where it may not be wise to try to be more restrictive because
No, I wouldn't suggest
because the
it.
county may not be
I
able
was
to
trying to
approve.
say,
at the same time
it's
though,
already in there. What did,
whatever it is in option A, it's the same on option B. So if you reduce it by the same, it's gonna be the same impact on both sides. So I think, you know, it's.
Sorry. we should have that in there.
So how do we move forward on this?
Well, maybe we won't be unanimous in a vote, but I think it's, the route is one thing. And the details of the actual width, and lateral impact, is a separate thing, I guess, but it's, if we say, I mean, I'm trying to understand how we would vote right now. Because it's hard to say we accept the route and it shall be built to the standards of a driveway or whatever connotes or it says that the lateral expansion and permeable covering, it won't have that. I mean, I don't know how, whether we have a right to do that, but if that's our assumption, or if that's what our going in is, that's fine, but this sounds like an iterative process. Because we don't have the actual plan that's gonna be paved, it's gonna be gravel, it's gonna be this wide, it's gonna be full over. We don't have that to say is consistent with the easement. But the route is one thing. I personally have no problem with the route. I have no problem with this argument.
so Richie, again, where it says the recommendation, staff recommends authority to approve the request of the new overlying access easement. How do we do that?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because we're not a party to the easement. So really what we're doing is we're approving the route. And then just the general proposition that there's gonna be an easement on there, but we're not a party to that easement.
But only the shared
But
part.
really what we're doing, yeah, only the shared, only across A19.
Right.
That's
Can we
all we're
just
being
do
asked
that?
to approve. And
'Cause I'd like to.
the question is, understand, the question in terms of what our rights are is whether that's consistent with the easement or not. I mean, the particulars of the design might bear on that, so you can approve it bare bones that we approve the route, and then everyone goes on. We can say we don't have enough information, so Does it have to be permeable? Can it be asphalt? How wide can it be here and there? And make a determination as to whether those elements are.
It's not,
consistent or not.
it's not, we didn't design the easement. We're just being a coal hole on it by the nature of this arrangement, preservation. So we're a coal holder, we get what we have, and we're being asked any spaghetti, give me a road, is it consistent? Well, I mean, I could probably, we'll move it this way, move it, we're not into that. But here we have in front of us, if you change the terminus, you can work out all those details. It appears that it is a better way to get to these building locations that's been worked out for us.
I think we all agree that that's true.
And
So Dr. Moses does bring up a good point that our job is to, if there's a change in the easement terms, we should seek to have greater conservation value. From where I sit, the engineering report that says there's less damage to critical slopes constitutes that. And I think that has to be part of whatever we agree to, so that establishes a precedent for the other changes in the future. The reason we did this is because the county engineer said there's less land disturbance and by virtue of doing this, because there is a big precedent issue here, as I see.
What I'm trying to prevent is an owner of B20 building 40-foot wide road with a parking lot and a party barn, with access off of a rural road, which would be far greater value than access through a subdivision. No one wants to go to a party barn through a subdivision. That's what I'm trying to prevent.
I totally understand, and trust me, I live next to those. But just ask for a restriction on.
Well, isn't that prevention somehow already baked in to where it is right now?
Well, the easement says the driveways constructed shall be for the grantee and the grantee's guests and invitees.
Ta-da.
There's the commercial use aspect.
Okay, so I suspect the enforcer would be whoever owns 819.
Can you not do commercial uses under the RPD though?
Yeah, you had asked for the deed. I remember reading that, but it's typical.
I mean, that should be the safeguard right there. Plus,
De minimis commercial recreational uses, it's fairly standard agricultural uses. And so whether the party barn fits within the agricultural use could be of debate.
That's the ambiguity.
It's
But
always.
it's still limited to what, 4,500 square feet?
No.
No farm building can exceed 4,500 feet without approval.
So it's ambiguous.
But 4,500 square feet is restrictive.
I would point out that we've had ambiguity with this RPD previously before this body. You want to move this forward, I would feel confident in approving in the future a specific proposal to provide the overlaying easement restriction on the issue of surface and width. I would not wish to propose that for this meeting until we have seen the other changes that are under consideration by the zoning department.
What else is left for the county staff to approve here? I'm guessing you're gonna have to come back with a slightly more detailed.
I think, what's being asked is to alter the draft of the easement deed, which can be submitted after this meeting, doesn't need to wait for the next one. But from my stance, the only approvals are the county staff's approval, which is the 14404 waiver, which they have a saying to be, at this point. Next step was to get, UR approval. The final step is to get board of supervisors approval.
I think we may have talked about just the plat specified the access points, because there were two. We talked about this, just updating the plat.
Well, we had said that the 14404 waiver essentially does that.
Okay, so we can, that
So
that
presumably,
needs to be
though,
recorded somehow though, but that's easy.
Waiver can be.
Yes,
presumably, in order to start building the driveway, the county has to approve some sort of design, or at least some general design parameters. I think what we're trying to do is maybe nail down what the
Design parameters.
maximum of those parameters. So
so we were looking at this analysis as being the maximum of what would be required for lot access and not.
we're not talking about the access. We like the access. We're talking about the design of the actual construction of the driveway itself.
I don't even know what, what a standard driveway, what I would be agreeing to. I just
Well, you
need to
gotta
look-
have it.
I'd say I need to look into that.
Right.
But also to say it'll be a 10-foot wide driveway,
Well,
there's gonna be areas that have to be a little wider to have turnaround, so it's getting an understanding of
I
that.
think we'd be talking about, maybe establishing a maximum, not something that you have to build to, but not build beyond.
I understand that Justin Ship is helping you with this.
Yes.
So, I mean, he could do this.
Well,
Yeah,
we haven't, they obviously haven't gone to full engineering, something like this. There are engineering plans that would be required.
That's what you're-
They, like we said, this is taken as far as this analysis as making sure it was apples to apples and, kind of worst case scenario to meet the standards of the ordinance, if you
Sure.
will.
so let me ask, I guess, what width do you all want?
Well, I don't know that we know that either, but we know we don't like when we see it, I suppose, but that's a great question. What's too wide?
So if we could get this to a point where you all could approve it conditionally if I make those changes to the
Mhm.
easements, just so that we don't have to do this again.
You keep talking about changing the
Other
easement.
easements for.
What do you-
Well, that's the mechanism for ensuring that I do it this way. When I say easement, sorry, I mean the access easement, not the RPD easement. The new easement that goes over top of it. That's where I would specify the conditions of
Yeah,
that
we're just
driveway.
saying, yeah, we approve we'll give you the access. We just want to make sure that the road that's constructed within it is, doesn't injure the conservation values of the land over which it's crossing.
Right, and wouldn't those requirements though be captured in the access easement? Is that the mechanism for that?
Yes, I guess so.
I think that's, Sharon, that goes to your question. It does it right now, but there could be language in there that's restrictive, or it could be very well defined. In terms of, in terms of a plat and then materials and widths and things like that. I've seen them with trail easements. I haven't necessarily seen them with roads, but it can be done.
Are there county engineering standards for a driveway? This isn't your standard driveway to a house from the street.
That's kind of.
That is what will be required. It sounds like you wanted to see a site section. Or,
Maybe.
and like what
I'm
that,
asking what they are.
I said that earlier.
16-degree.
16%,
I think we're more interested now in what's the width of the travel way and what's the composition of the.
No county standard is gonna set a maximum. You are looking for some sort of maximum width of. this
Yeah.
road. No county standard is gonna set a maximum. It's gonna set a minimum because it's a safe access standard, not a restrain the width of roads standard.
That's what we're after.
Yeah.
We're after a minimum.
I think we're
A
here,
maximum. We're after
we
a maximum.
want the minimum to be the maximum.
If you're waiting for the county to set.
And
a
you're gonna
maximum-
conflict with safety
Scott.
standards.
We're not the county.
No, I know, but I'm saying if you are looking for a consistent standard on which to base a decision on the maximum width of the road, unfortunately, we can't help you with that because we don't have a maximum.
What, to go back a minute, what I'm trying to do is to get us out of the position of having to write something. We should be reacting and accepting or rejecting or modifying. We do not have the information in front of us in order to do any of those three things. If what we want is a road that is permeable and a width sufficient, but not to exceed an amount that the fire truck comes in, assuming that that's okay with the county code.
So how do we put that in? How do we put it into words and where do we put it?
Okay,
It's not our job to do that.
I need to know what you're asking of me so I can do that.
How can I be any more specific? We
You
want
haven't
the
given me
minimum.
how wide you want.
No, he's not, he's actually saying, I don't want to tell you how wide it is. I want you to design a road
That's
with,
minimum.
Show us what you are asking us to approve. Its width, its course, and its surface, period. We'll react to it.
so can I?
and I think all you need to do is focus on the portion of the road that's within the shared access. Forget about the rest of it.
The only item of concern for me is once you get up to the ridge line, it's flat and that can be impervious easily. It's the cut up to the ridge line. At some sense of steepness, I don't think you can do gravel.
Yeah.
I'll
I don't-
weigh in on that.
I don't
because
know
have
that
a-
for sure.
I have a steep driveway. It's approaching 15. And I paved the whole thing.
That's my concern.
Because
I'm
you
fine
can't,
with agreeing
you
to a
can't
width.
plow it and you
I'm
can't.
concerned about agreeing to the finish just because of that steep area.
And for the right
Understandably.
reason, because it'll wash like crazy, erosion, sediment, all that.
But you're much better off putting. But that's not the worst part of the road, and it's not as, given the entire length of the roads, the driveways, it's a small portion.
So would this body be comfortable saying we approve this insofar as the road shall be no more than the minimum requirements for the
Safety out,
County.
EMS,
engineering?
emergency services. Like Richie said, our maximum is their minimum.
Whatever the minimum is, the county says within the need for
I'm happy.
runoffs and all that
I'm
stuff.
happy with
That
that.
works for me.
That works.
You would have to do some form of that anyway with the road maintenance agreement between you on B20 and the owner of A19.
That would be captured, I believe, in the access easement. Yeah, the
Right,
maintenance.
I mean, that would all fold in together. So then everybody knows what it is.
That way we don't have to write it.
We don't want to do that.
Right.
I mean, and furthermore, for us to request something that is more minimum than maybe the county by code. The material used makes a difference, and I'm not against paving it where it needs to be paved, but like you say, when I saw most of that, it's pretty flat, it doesn't look that much, most of that.
And paving where it needs to be paved might be, do it where you need it now and further paving upon approval if you guys are there for a couple of years and realize, wow, this is a crummy spot too.
And I grew up on long gravel driveway. I'm not opposed to that. I like that. It's just those areas that are steep. I don't want to agree to it with that.
Absolutely.
Approximately how many miles is it from,
It's about 1 mile.
so it's 1 mile that we're talking about from when they come off the Taylor's Gap to you hit B20?
No, that's to the B20 build site. The whole thing is 1 mile.
Oh, really?
So-
So it's even less than a mile, what we're talking about.
The
that
easement, yeah.
easement that overlays.
Yes. It's
Half
close
a mile?
close to that.
And of that house, what portion is deep enough to?
It's just that little cut up to get to the ridge. So it's
At the
1,000 feet less.
yeah, probably, yeah. I don't know for certain.
Will we have to approve another amendment for E19?
There's only one access.
No, there's nothing happening to it.
And they've already got the right for a driveway or a road to access their building
And then
site.
you're gonna have a private easement with A19.
It actually forces a better outcome for both, for
Lots.
access to both of their buildings.
Especially because they agree to use the same road. They're not gonna, he's not gonna come off and duplicate. I know he has to go off that old road that's right now to get to the building site. The way that,
Was there language about those, the access having to be originate from internal subdivision?
Subdivision plat that was approved by the county required both these lots to have access from the internal roads.
Look at it this way, if we don't do this, then
Somebody's,
that happens, which is
Exactly.
terrible.
That's my point.
I mean, what more do you need?
we're this close.
To your point, there is a precedent here. We need to thread the needle in such a way that it doesn't become a precedent for
I think
I
you,
think we can do
I think you have what you need. You need to come up to us with specific language in a new overlay easement that specifies maximum standard, which will be the minimum.
So I thought that y'all were leaning towards recommending approval or taking whatever action with that provided
Yes.
in your motion or whatever you're doing, instead of it coming back to you again. With this gentleman's proposal, I'm sorry, I
To
don't.
meet the condition.
We
set
could
the-
do that, right, Richie? We
Can set the
possibly,
conditions.
I mean,
Okay, so I missed that. What's the question, John?
was whether or not, if beyond today's decision with what we just discussed, would it have to come back to us for any reason?
The motion up on the screen.
So I'm looking to, so there was a proposed resolution, and I'm looking to add a clause that says, whereas the current property owner proposes to build the shared driveway. And might have that language that does not exceed county minimal planning standard. Rebecca, is that what it would be, or zoning, or?
Emergency
Well,
service.
minimum standards necessary for safe, convenient access.
For a residential.
Are those based on our zoning code?
And I think that was to Scott's point, it's the minimums. You don't want them to exceed the maximums more than they might need to for sound engineering practices, however, I don't know the final wording. We've seen things like that before, I don't have which in front of me. Leave some discretion to the county engineer. But this, generally, this is the plan. But it would be, in general, it would be in accord with this proposal. Is how we approach this with special use permits. We don't have the final exact details, but I understand this.
so you're providing the framework of what we've all
Right.
discussed and agreed to.
Yes.
Permeable surfaces or materials?
Are you
Permeable
adding more
rock.
detail than just the minimum standards
Well, I mean,
necessary for safe
I
and
heard
convenient?
Dr. Moses and
Well, because we're only, I think we're really only talking about the portion of the road that's within the shared access easement. It's the only thing we have.
understand that.
Okay,
But so I'll pose to Rebecca, if we just say minimal standards, does making it 100% asphalt satisfy minimal standards?
Well, I'm not the county engineer and I just think that we can't anticipate what needs to be gravel or what needs to be asphalt. If you can do asphalt, I don't know that we always make the distinction between asphalt and gravel when we're talking about impervious.
I'm hearing that this body might be making the distinction between asphalt and gravel. If not, I
well,
mean,
we want them to be able to use asphalt on the steep sections where not doing that actually causes more environmental harm than having it.
right, but my understanding is that minimal standards may permit 100% asphalt.
Standard we were talking about. Width, slope.
Yeah, we're not specifying either.
Yeah, man, I think material doesn't fall under minimum standards.
There is a minimum, I mean,
So if we adopt the language that I've proposed so far, we walk out of here. And the county may approve 100% asphalt. And I suspect this body's not gonna be happy.
So we need to clarify.
What we're asking for, in my view, should be not just the easement over the B19, but the total road going to the building site on B20. As much of that as possible needs to be permeable surface. That's the point to.
Is that acceptable to you?
I can hear, are you asking him?
Both of you?
I didn't hear what you
Well,
said.
The
I
problem
think-
again is the slopes.
Yes, and those, those places that need asphalt,
Bring us a plan that we can approve, that shows where you're gonna put it. You can't have your,
Because we can't, there's no way to craft a resolution to get out of here today, but to get done what needs to be done, I think, with just design the road, look at where, you don't have to say in this inch is gonna be this, but you say, generally speaking, the road's gonna be this stuff. And on these reaches where it's from above 10% or whatever, we're gonna need to pave that.
yeah, and that's where I don't, it's couchy using the language of, of using not even specific places, but just applying grade to it.
Yeah, I don't understand how that exhibit or how does that even, does that become part of the resolution or how?
No, well, I mean, I think we'd make the resolution contingent on us seeing your final design proposal for the road.
and that's what we would approve.
So the resolution could incorporate, like, so for example, right now, the way the resolution is drafted is it references exhibit B.
I'm not planning on building for 5+ years here. So the future home sometime in the future.
Yeah.
And so I'm not planning on putting a driveway in anytime soon.
Anyway, the answer to your question is yes, it could include if any designs, it could include a reference language that's put into the deed
You
of
see,
easement.
in this stretch, from here to here, it's gonna meet the county's minimum standards and it won't be paved.
So y'all are
In this
comfortable,
section, it's pretty steep there. We plan to pave that. I don't, maybe it's not you who does that because you sold it to somebody else in town, right? But at least we've tied whoever those people are to doing that as well.
So how is this any different than us putting off, coming back to us for approval under a general easement? If you want to do something to the property, come back for approval.
It's kind of the same thing.
It's the same thing, and there's a little bit of risk. You see us. There's a little bit, but I think you see this, what we're after. And if we feel that, the path is fine, but there's these details that that you need to come back before you build, and when you have the complete site plan. I mean, if we don't approve that, the problem is approving something that we don't have the
Okay.
details on. But I don't understand how we get past this sequence.
Well-
You don't have the plan.
I mean, I would put together a plan. I'm not buying the property without having this button up.
Right.
Definitely not.
I mean, we make the conditions clear cut enough.
Yeah.
That it narrows that out, just it tightens it up.
My sense is the bigger issue is the route. Because that involves other parties. And so all those things get worked out. You have a right to use this. We approve that. It's the details that we won't see later. How do we put off? Because obviously it sounds like there's no way to right now say, give a phrase that says the minimum standard is everything we're just talking about. It could end up being paved, lighted, culverts, drainage, all kinds of things around it. I don't know.
I mean, I think that. Yeah, I mean, I think that we had been approaching the analysis not to that level of detail, and that was sort of assumed. And that's just my personal take on it.
I mean,
In terms of the other values gained, any road would have to have those things, and my understanding is you're not regulating them now, it's just where it's not in the stream buffer anymore, less distance, less critical slopes disturbance. But I understand what you're saying, what the committee's desire is.
We like the where, we just want to know more about the how. That's all.
If you penned a comprehensive resolution.
Is there interest in making a motion to do it today, or are we waiting for more detail? We'll do as you direct. I've penned, in addition to the existing resolution, a clause that says the current owner proposes to build the shared driveway that does not exceed county minimal zoning standards for residential access and permits only permeable surface except for those portions on slopes determined by the county engineer to require, I don't know if it's non-permeable or unpermeable pavement.
My objection to that is that it does not speak to B20.
Doesn't speak to what?
It does not speak to B20, the design of B20.
Oh.
No, but in return for our action, we can request and insist on restrictions to the road, the altered road and access.
I have a hard time, I don't know, hanging this on a quid pro quo. I understand where you're going, and I get it.
those parties aren't in the room.
That was my point at the start.
B20 is subject to the same deed restriction that any driveway placed on B20 needs to be consistent with the easement. Whether we're being asked or not, I mean, I don't have control, we don't have control over that being asked.
Look, go back to first principles. We're being asked to modify a plan that was approved 20 years ago. A house may or may not be built on these two parcels. They haven't for 20 years. They may not for the next 20 years or the next 50 years. Let's not take an action that invites abuse of the RPD process and puts this body in a very dubious position of not protecting the public's interest. We should not be initiating changes. We should be reacting to changes and saying these are consistent with conservation value or not. We're trying to come to a meeting of the minds that may improve the conservation value of the property by altering the access to it. It isn't clear to me that that is absolutely the case, having walked the property, not entering the property, but looking at it from the outside. But from a process standpoint, we should be reacting to a specific plan. We've given the landowner here or the option holder here an indication that we would look favorably on a permeable surface that disturbs the land the least, which means a narrow road for residential purposes, in return for leave for a new access easement that will meet his purposes. I can't see any more than that.
I'm not in favor of trying to get something additional on B20. I'm focused on the easement, on the overlay, on B19. And I'm okay with what you read.
Will we have 20 come to us? Or is that not our decision?
This is 20.
They don't need to come.
Nice.
They have an easement. They have an easement.
19 is the one we don't.
It's what crosses over. You cross over A19
Yeah.
to get to B20.
We have nothing to do with 19.
That's what the
Theoretically
easement
not.
is,
Oh.
with overlays,
Okay.
but they both have easement terms on them.
But we're only talking about one for this.
A half a mile
Yes.
on A19,
Okay.
right?
Same analysis applies to B20, we're just not being asked.
What does that mean? We're not being asked by a potential builder.
Or landowner,
Or landowner,
or someone
okay,
who holds an
okay.
option or.
But I was trying to get around to. If they're gonna change the terminus, are we gonna be asked to weigh in on 20?
Oh, because,
Probably not.
look, the access easement is this. Here to here.
Yep.
It's this thing. So it doesn't really matter. If we give them the parameters or they design the road, come back and we approve whatever their design is, then that's gonna apply to this lot equally, or to the owner of this lot equally, as it applies to this. The only thing Dr. Moses asked for is a little more clarity on what's gonna happen to this section of road, even though it's outside of what we're approving. Right?
So the easy way would be asking to apply it to the entirety of the road, not just the piece that is being asked for the easement.
Yeah, well, I don't think the design issues from here to here are different from. here to
Correct.
here, right?
Sorry?
The design issues for the actual road in this segment are different than they are in this stuff. Right?
You mean as far as critical slopes impacts?
No, well, in terms of like whether you have to pay, because it's steep.
Yeah, it's just, like I say, it's just kind of that switchback in the front there. Right. There's one little section,
This one.
I guess what we're getting at also too is that
one little spot right here that.
would you be will to the stipulations we're applying to the east part, would you be willing to apply them to?
Would that apply like up at the house?
Oh, I mean, yeah, for like a parking area and stuff like
going in the
that.
Basketball court.
You should ask
Right.
us to determine what's consistent.
Yeah, now we're getting specific,
No, I mean, that's
and
right,
that's
that was hypothetical.
yeah, no, but it's a good question to ask.
I mean,
But I mean, if you're
Not basketball court, I mean a hoop against the house.
Chip's point is that if
File suit and get it
If,
ripped up,
if you want to use our
Yeah,
approval process to control what happens,
get a
here,
determination.
then you really only need to control what happens on that segment.
But Chip,
of the
you
road.
want
You're
to
not gonna
apply the
build
entire
more road.
roadway.
Beyond that, what, who would do that? Why would you do that? So we want to make sure that this doesn't become either a commercial or quasi-commercial access.
How
Gap Road,
are we weighing in on that?
because we can.
So aren't you nervous?
Everything with this board makes me nervous right now.
Well, I mean, if we approve everything within that parcel, 19, that you want to build a house.
I'm on 20. I'm
He's
on the
on
one
20.
right.
On 20.
Sorry, I'll get it right, left and right. Now, how's this?
He's on 20.
Okay, you're on 20. How can, if that's what we're going to hopefully make a resolution or something. You're betting that that will be also approved for 19.
No,
No,
No, 19's out of it. Dr. Moses, you're not comfortable with the restrictions on the part that we're granting the easement on is gonna keep this safe from further or potential abuse down the road.
So the important part to me is engineers have done this line from here going through A19, going into B20, going to the house site on B20 and made these calculations on slope and water. And we saw the differential and it's about a 25% improvement. I don't need to know the details of the width and the material. I know that it's a better conservation solution. And if we have staff and county ordinances and easement terms already laid out and we bracket that, I'm okay with that. I don't need to barter to get more detail on how you get to the house site.
that makes it fit.
I have a,
Go.
doesn't this landowner have to also agree? Whatever it is we're talking about?
Yeah, the option holder, I'll have to go talk to them about this before that's why I can't commit to anything right here, right now. I mean, I think if it was just agreeing to set it to the minimum standard, we could agree to that. But on the impervious thing, I don't know the answer to.
Because worst case scenario, they say, well, I never agreed to that. I'm not gonna pay. I'm not gonna help you pay for that much road. I never agreed to that. I don't know
Right.
where that leaves us.
That's not part, that's in between, that's between.
Yeah, that's,
And that either happens with the existing, with the existing landowner that it travels with the property, or once these guys buy it, it's an agreement between you two.
All right, so I'm gonna take one more crack. So if you can come back to us. I mean, maybe we can conditionally approve this today, subject to. Some more specificity of this design parameters, even if you're not designing every inch of the road. If there are places in here where it's steep enough that, nobody would, if you're gonna go to the expense of doing all of this, you'd pave this section, keep it from washing out all the time. Tell us that, show us where those are. Tell us how you would build this road. Width is the big factor, I think, for us.
that's not the factor for me, it's the surface, I just don't.
Yeah, we
I'm-
don't want it to be any more paved than it has to be to be.
Oh, I know that,
So can we do that?
Do that and
If we approve the combined access easement, subject to him coming back. Show us the thing that we don't know about, that we don't know what we don't know.
an approval subject to coming back is not.
That's true. I'm just saying, for a resolution today, if doing a resolution today helps move the ball down the field. If it doesn't, then do the road and we'll do this again.
When is the next meeting? Is it prior to the Board of Supervisors?
When is that?
Well, no, we were trying to get this to the board supervisor for acceptance, it's certainly not.
So it's not, that would have to be.
August 7th.
Do we have a hold on that? For August 7th?
I was assuming that.
Gotcha.
Wait.
Gotcha. I mean, the board can communicate a general approval as to the town, but not commit to it until seeing the
The conditions met.
conditions in terms of the design state, what's being designed.
And that would just be through an exhibit that I provide to you to be attached to the resolution.
I mean, I'm not an engineer, I guess it would be an exhibit, or I've seen hand drawings, I've seen
Barn napkins.
plats and everything having to do with hiking trails and stuff. I mean, they can go as
It's like a typical cross section. You know how they do.
Well,
Like an
but the
elevation.
cross section wouldn't show the areas that are,
No, but you'd have to show that.
well, the cross section would just be the minimum county standard.
We just want to make sure it doesn't go beyond that. So we would make that a condition of our.
Now, I don't know if areas could be identified as to what would be paved as opposed to.
We don't know that either, looking. But
And
so
you may
that-
not know that until the
that's a little-
driveway's.
Unfortunately, that's a little bit more homework for you, but it's doable.
So-
It's
I
not
mean,
hard.
that's my concern though, is if I agree to put gravel through that whole middle section and then it turns out that one keeps washing out, like, I want the ability to fix it somehow.
Yeah, you might not know that until 3 years into it, though.
That's my head. Let's see what the surface.
Would we be comfortable passing the Scott and his gang to approving the final plan in accordance with the overriding view of preserving conservation values?
I don't know. His or his
You didn't
department.
need anybody else's.
You have to sign off.
Would you pay?
It's delegating it to.
No, but in
your
the end,
department.
But yeah, I would again want the ability to
Sure.
pave stuff in the future if it needs it for fixing it up.
Yeah, and I think that could be, I don't put into wording to
I think so.
easily, you know, that.
I don't know, easily.
That I mean, because it's like, as I said, that,
Well, again,
looking at the engineering, so, you know, if it's gonna exceed a certain percentage grade, you know, you don't even have to walk, you could just apply that mathematics to the road and say, these are cases that potentially will need to be paved. And,
yeah, maybe there's just a threshold. We're saying anything over X% grade can be paved.
Yeah.
That would be-
But you have to show us where it is, so we could actually see how much.
So I suppose rather than staff, be left to the chairman. He knows what, look,
You know, what we're looking for.
I mean, the thing, keeping this unanimity is,
well, and it, this is also for your benefit. I mean, I'm just imagining, all that stuff that's happening on 19 is really, we shouldn't, we have nothing to really say about. We'd say the path is fine. The overall path, even taking into considerations what's on 20 and 19 together, we're looking at that compared to only, if I see it right, getting into 20.
We love the path to the building sites that would never be approved.
That's right.
In this day and age,
No,
but they're there.
but right now, our comparison, if I'm not wrong, is with something that just goes to the house from the cul-de-sac, this house.
Mhm.
And now we're weighing in on this whole, not the driveway up to that other house, but this whole access.
Yeah.
Which is on two properties. I mean, we're already influencing that, but is that really what we're doing legally? Or we just, like it's been pointed out, we're here for the overlay.
in theory, on the parcel on the right,
Yes.
in theory, there was no road there.
Right.
You know, it's not, we're not changing anything.
But by definition, it's going to be controlled by the access.
Yeah.
Gets you the same.
And the thing is, I also, like, what happens on 20 is dictated by the access of the easement that we're granting to, and it seems like the landowner whose property that goes over would have some say.
Yeah. But
what happens on that, going through that easement.
But we are actually looking further than just this property, because if you compared the critical slopes for just the part that's on this property against what you'd get coming in and across, down and around, that's the old,
Yeah, that changes
that's
it.
more better than this piece of property, but we're actually looking further, so I think we are getting pro in a way, as long as that's provided to this property.
What happens if the owner of, any future owner of 19 says, screw that, I mean, yeah, the county approved a potential joint access place, but I don't want to do that.
That easement would be a deeded right of way. You know, we're allowing them permission to establish a deed right of way, a deed of easement.
Okay.
So
And the existing owner is willing to do that, at least that much, as far as you know.
Yes, I mean, I drafted the easement for him. He said that works for me.
Okay.
And I sent it to you.
Okay, good. That answers that. I just want to make sure that we're doing something that's not gonna get undone.
So while I know this is not gonna meet everyone's approval, I don't, it's, Dr. Moses, your concerns are valid and appreciated. And I don't know how we can address them and move this forward at the same time. I feel like we could put this to a vote right now with the language that Richie has proposed, if anyone's willing to make the motion.
So could we add a provision that the chair view the final plans subject to what we talked about? Sign off. That allows that,
So what exactly is final plan?
well, just the things we talked about,
So just get him something subsequent to this
Yeah.
meeting.
like, the slopes more than X are gonna be paved. Here's,
But so I would be fine agreeing to that, but again, because there is the A19 potential owner, I don't think I can agree to that resolution without getting their way in right now, so I don't know if we can.
Just don't want to lose sight of these easements being perpetual. Our determination is that with the chair's approval is consistent with the deed. This could potentially be 15 years down the road. I'm not committing you to serve anything, but I mean.
Current. The chair at the time,
Right, it would be the chair at the time.
Dr. Moses.
So I thought it was,
Feel compelled to take a vote today. You're saying that we feel an obligation to proceed. That's the point that on which I would differ. We are initiating changes. It is best that we react to changes. And without having enough information to react to, it's very difficult to do it.
It changes nothing for you, actually, whether we agree to the resolution tonight. Or you, because you're gonna do them,
You can do what you're gonna do.
you're gonna do the
Yeah.
little design thing, just do that, bring it back and we'll get it done.
Sir, are we sure that you covered everything you want covered the third round? Because I'm not sure what the first round covered.
Yes, there's a big issue about the building sites. We need information about where this road is going. If the building site is going to be changed, what we're seeing there may not apply. So give us in entirety what changes are being requested and what is to be approved.
I thought those building sites were
Building sites are
carved
locked
in
in.
stone.
But his memo says otherwise.
Well, he asked, but he just said they're locked in. They can't be changed.
Let us see it. Show us what's being proposed. How many additional buildings? How far from the original road? How much additional paving has to be done near the building site to outbuildings and so forth? Show us the plan. This is clear.
My concern,
So you don't trust the easement that's in place?
No, I don't.
All those, well, that's not your place. The easements are in place.
We're not crafting
to
our.
change the conditions on the zoning approval of multiple preservation trails, which involved colors and lighting and agreements with the building site limitation was locked down. Suppose doing this on the fly, but Mr. Achenbach, while he's doing the having the engineers do the engineering work for the slopes and paving for the road, could also submit or revise for that request for changing those conditions, and yeah, we could bring that back. Where that started to concern me was where he said locations of other buildings, because the easement doesn't require, the subdivision doesn't require that we know where the house and all possible future buildings are going to be, and I can't imagine any, especially in perpetuity where a lot of this accessory structures, garages. about can request for clarification on if he can get those conditions approved, if he changes to the conditions approved by zoning. To the level of detail of all future buildings, I think it's probably practically.
But the genesis of my point is that if we were to be presented this as an easement to approve initially, first approval, we would not approve it. And therefore, to do a modification to allow access to something that we today would not approve, it is, in my view, not meeting the purposes of this body. When we have an opportunity to rectify a wrong of 20 years ago, we should take it.
I think that's a big hypothetical. I mean, we're talking about a half a mile with an easement over a road where it changes and it improves the environmental part of it because of the slope thing.
I'm not opposed to that, and I would vote to approve a proposal that said it's going to be this long, following that course, this surface, this width. That's all I'm saying. Be specific about the path it's going to take. You have it here, the surface and the width. That's what I'm looking for. But I'm also eager that we not initiate a change. We should be reacting to a change that is put before us.
Sounds to me like you've got to go back and talk to one of the landowners, no matter what, right? You know, when we talk about services, right?
So, yeah, I need to get their sign off on agreeing to the resolution.
So there's no point in taking a vote here. And so I think what Dr. Moses just laid out is
My
very
point is to
clear.
give you reassurance. We will approve this with my blessing if the others agree, if you give us that information. But don't ask us to approve something that's in the ether.
And I will give you the information you requested on the driveway. That is, I'm.
That's all we're
agreeing
asking
to that.
for. That's all we're asking.
The zoning issue, which we discussed, I've already submitted that determination request. I'm not sure what you want from me there. This house, I'm not gonna design a home site that I'm gonna build in 5 years plus.
Let's just stick to that.
Yeah, the roads are
To
only,
be really clear that for him to go talk to somebody, this is always a chicken or egg thing. He leaves here, he heard the notes, he doesn't have anything in writing sort of thing, I guess that discussion shows in minutes, and he goes and presents it, and then he brings it back in and we tweak it again. Or it looks a lot different because it'll be different people sitting at the table next time who missed the meeting this time and kind of the same last time. You weren't part when Shemp was here and there was a lot discussed. That was another couple hours of going around. And so
If we have a road plan for Dr. Moses' request, if we
My plan,
approve that, then that codifies whatever was established at the time.
my plan after this meeting is to resubmit a new draft of the easement that will include language as to the specifications of the driveway. It will also include an exhibit to that easement that shows the locations of proposed asphalt allowable areas. And that is my next step.
Yes.
Is that in line with?
Assuming the terms are agreeable, would be agreeable to me.
And your driveway starts on
Taylor Gap Road.
Taylor Gap Road. That's your driveway.
It's a shared driveway.
Share, but it's your driveway,
he has an easement to it.
right? And the other person you're gonna talk to, you don't have anything to say about his
the
This little
spur that
stand-
goes
little
up.
spur.
No,
That's
I-
not your-
yeah.
What we're weighing in on is where you would have impervious, or you'd have all the way from Taylor Gap Road.
Yes.
We have a plan.
So
Me too.
Technically, at this point, no action is being taken.
That's correct.
So Scott, we'll have to then defer to September for board of supervisors, is that right?
Is that okay? It's not great.
I'll have to get a contract extension again. We've already gotten probably 5 of them, so.
All right.
All right,
Sorry about that.
no, we'll get there hopefully.
Yep.
All right, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Yeah. How you feeling?
The issue we have. Remote participation. Do we need a debrief on anything with this, or we just?
So the
we-
debriefing is that the Virginia General Assembly made some mandatory changes that local bodies have to take. The biggest one is that although we were preemptive, we said that, hey, look, every change that the General Assembly makes is going to be incorporated into our policy. They said that the public bodies have to take action every year. So that's one big change. The other big change is that that it allowed us to increase the number of all virtual meetings from 25% to 50%. They still can't be consecutive, and you have to have particular reasons. And the other ones had to do with if you have remote access, which I don't know that we've done recently. But if it has to do with if you lose the video feed or lose the audio feed. So it's really housekeeping.
So that's for the entire meeting. That doesn't speak to a single member who's offsite
The
phoning it in.
So,
so to speak.
right, no, that's remote, that's different. That's the remote access. So theoretically, if Rose were on her sailboat, we have to have a quorum physically present in those circumstances, so losing that member doesn't affect anything. And that's the all virtual meeting. And
Still need to have a quorum present.
yes,
A physical.
for remote, for all virtual, you have to have a quorum virtually present. And I don't want to get into.
You can't have a mix. I mean, if the quorum is physical, the virtual person doesn't count.
Right, and so if you have other virtual people,
So you
if
have
you have a
to,
hybrid like you're saying, you still gotta have, I think, 5 here.
you want us to adopt your proposal?
So the floor would be open for a motion to approve the resolution amending the policy and readopting.
So moved.
Yeah, second.
More time on that.
I'm trying to move.
Yeah, I'm trying.
Time we spent earlier.
So Rich, just so I'm clear, it sounds like there is a possibility time to time having a purely remote meeting, but no more than 50% of.
And those,
Still has requirements.
We have to call it a special meeting, but those are hoops I jumped through and we can do that.
That would be, if there's an August meeting,
You
that
don't
might.
need all the medical.
Scott hits 5 confirmed members.
No, all virtual
That was
meetings,
fine.
no. That's not medical, that's not personal. That's just this board calls a special meeting and says it's gonna be all virtual. And I'm working with the EDA, their regular meeting, they've changed to a special meeting. It's gonna be all virtual.
That's the loophole. Call it special.
Is,
Well, and you have to identify what you're gonna discuss in the notice, and you're stuck with what you put in that notice.
what, is there a time frame?
Meeting could be virtual.
yes,
August would be a great time to start.
So is there a minimum lead time?
I'm not worried about it. Yes, it's 3 days.
Okay, all right.
I mean, so we could have a regular meeting, and then you say, oh, no, we're gonna call it special as long as I have 3 days advance to
Yeah.
post it. And you can't change it after that. We can change it all the way up to that 3-day point, however you want to go back and forth. But when we hit day 3, we're locked in stone.
So like, for example, Scott sends out the notice, this is gonna be our next meeting. Vast majority of people say we're not gonna be here.
that's why it's important to weigh in early, people.
Could remote from our votes in the Bermuda Triangle or something like that.
And at that point, you'll call it a special meeting. And so the language will change and we'll put the agenda on there.
Bermuda, in the Bermuda Triangle.
Was there a vote?
There was discussion.
Didn't we just have that?
All in favor? Aye.
Clarify for the minutes who moved and who seconded.
I'm sorry, say again?
Who moved?
He moved, I seconded.
That sounds good.
Chip and Jeep.
Yeah, I picked up.
I had potential new business, but don't,
Several people.
but Scott does.
2 items of new business. First is it's good news that some of you who were here last time heard that same here is still starting back in January. This is fiction. The field monitor has moved up to a planner position to work as a transportation program. We have now refilled the field monitor at that facility. That's.
Congratulations.
All right.
Like you asked for the easements and I read.
So I'm sorry, just
Yeah, there's-
kind of, I'm not hearing you. So you said the
Some people
field
found
position is
loopholes.
now open. Is that-
Who,
Phil.
who, what is the name of the new field?
Less specific.
Oh, I know.
Okay.
We put the big family farm in this in 2000 with VOL
Other
and
bid- New
it's
business.
awfully good now.
This property parcel 7424. Easier to see here. I had an easement proposal request from the owner. This is Newcomb Mountain Lane up here is at the top edge is the Rocks Reservation Tract easement.
Which one?
That,
What's at the top?
the Rocks Preservation
Okay.
Tract. So north. section. I talked to the landowner here. I wish I could properly, in my mind, there is one building site on this property. He thinks there are two, I'm not sure. I agree. The tomato soup color, which is supposed to be orange, is critical slopes. This is a stream. This is the courthouse road here, which is public road that comes back here, and there to his property. I believe it's a 15-foot wide access. I told them I didn't think this was a viable property for easement because it's barely developed on his general access.
I didn't hear how big you said it was, how many acres? We need to get you a microphone. I just-
It's particularly difficult. So I have new hearing aids, so I sound terribly loud to myself.
You're
They
not.
kept telling me that I'm.
You're not.
Can I borrow your hearing aids, please?
It's, has my back. It's 97 acres. Again, it's almost entirely green slopes. And very little buildable, area on the property, and there's, I think, one building site. He thinks two. I told the owner that I didn't think this was a viable proposal candidate because the severe existing limitations on access and buildability. There's not much here to give up. Usually when I tell people that, they say, okay, never mind. This person said, no, I still want to do it. So I said I would bring it to you all. And there's no proposal. Just feedback. Do you agree with my assessment? This is a very difficult place to do.
Does he think it's got hypothetically 5 divisions rights on it?
Yeah, I think it's got 5, so 97 acres, that's.
Plus he'd have more after he does the 21.
What's your rationale that it is not a good candidate?
Because when we do that comparison, one of the key policies in that first page of the proposal is there has to be some residential. And I don't think there is here.
Does he own any property?
It's mostly all roads.
Does he own anything adjacent to it or just that?
Wouldn't it still be prudent to accept an easement for further protection?
This body has argued about that several times before, which is why I was being cautious. If there was a really notable resource, if it was a historic house or a high importance habitat, or then yeah,
It's a connector.
it's a connector to the properties. It was logged several years ago. It's kind of recovering from that. I'm not sure what there's specifically to protect if we're not effectively preventing something.
So what you're saying, acreage wise, you could have.
So that's the central
You
point.
never get permission to build on all but maybe one of them?
It's like a large preservation tract right now, basically.
80% of VOF's easements are open space easements. They just protect open space.
We operate under the Open Space Land Act.
If you all disagree, I'm fine to talk to this guy.
I mean, what are his expectations? Not that it matters that much, but what out of doing this easement, what's he expecting to get out of that? Just personal satisfaction? That's good enough. But if he's, I mean,
Financial incentive type.
It depends who
that's
the,
not our.
yeah, now it depends
That's
who the
his-
appraiser is.
But we,
That's what he's trying to get out of it. That's usually the number one
You know,
thing.
If there's only one
What
building
what's
site,
your angle?
an appraiser worth their salt is gonna go in there and say, you're not giving up anything.
Oh, well, we've all seen those too.
right, we can,
It's already been timbered.
yeah.
We want to preserve.
Perpetuity.
Does he want to preserve?
Strongest motivation for conservation is.
Going to the law.
No,
Yeah, I'm sorry, say that again.
He wants to
The
keep.
strongest motivation for a conservation easement is the emotional commitment to open space. It's not financial. We happen to see a lot of them that are financially motivated, but from the totality of easements, the most compelling motivation is the person wants to have a property and see it as it is.
You could look at it, because zoning could change. You don't
There's no financial incentive to do easements when we first started doing easements back in the sixties. None.
Dating
State
yourself.
Land Act and the Farm Preservation Act and all that stuff that went through the IRS changed.
We've learned in 80 years.
I would say, let's see it.
Game.
I think I would concur.
It's gonna be, I'll be a little creative, but that's fine. I just want to get your feedback.
Well, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, if the guy, wants to put in our easement, it's
We can have a standard
Theoretically,
forestry terms and worthy and unto themselves, right?
97 acres.
Yeah. Does he have an idea how restrictive easements can be?
I think so. I talked to him probably a month ago, so. I'll tell him again. People tend to forget.
I had a client that we sold some land to and he called up because he looked up, saw that I was on this board. He goes, I think I'm gonna put an easement on here. I went, no, you don't. No, he wants to do a guest house and a barn and a this and a that. And then I said, you don't want to do that.
build what you want to build.
But he thought it sounded like a good idea at the time. Yeah, do what you want to do. And then if, look at it. And I think he only had 2 or 3 division rates on 65 acres.
All right, so we can agree to. Scott.
I mean, you don't all need to take any action. Just want to
Yeah,
get
no.
feedback.
Yeah, no, thank you for bringing that up. And
He's
That may
actually-
be a 10-minute.
whoever owns that little parcel up there is gonna be happy.
This.
Yeah, that's.
That's the owner of the rocks.
Oh, is it?
It's easy.
Is there more new business?
I don't know. I don't believe so.
All right.
Let's
Into
go.
our
Who wants to go home? Is there a motion? Second? Discussion? All in favor?
Good meeting.
Woo!
PRDs.
Excuse my stridency, colleagues.
That's